RealAg Live.
Hey, Kara Oosterhuis here with RealAgriculture.com. It is Monday. We are back here today with another RealAg Live episode, and I have here today with me Jeremy Boychyn, who's an agronomy research extension specialist with Alberta Wheat and Barley Commissions. How's it going today, Jeremy?
It's going wonderful, Kara. How are you today?
I'm good. I know one of the things we wanted to make sure we talked about, and which is putting me in a good mood, is we had some rain over the weekend. I know not all of Alberta had rain, but there was pockets that had some rain, some dry pockets. So do you want to talk about what you've heard from some growers?
I think we could maybe put it down to the power of Mother's Day, bringing that rain in. So
Oh, yeah.
happy belated Mother's Day to all the mothers out there in ag. Yeah, I mean, much welcomed rain. I don't know, we haven't seen rain like that since summer of last year in most parts of Alberta. So I know there was a lot of seeds sitting in the ground waiting for rainfall to come. So, much welcomed in the majority of the province. That northeast part of the province is still looking dry. If we look over the past, 13, 14 days, they still really haven't received much of anything, a few drops here and there. So I'm sure they're still waiting for something to come in. The west part of Peace River is still a little bit on the dry side. And then if we get in around Lethbridge and up towards Vulcan, that's still a little bit on the dry side as well. So there are still pockets, but a lot of that central part and west of Edmonton, northwest of Edmonton, they got rain that I know that the majority of producers are waiting for. I know there was a few like John Gully who kept saying, keep it away. I don't need any more just yet. So, but I know there was quite a few that were welcoming getting this rain in, but it doesn't stop there. It's enough to get us germinating in the majority of areas, but obviously we need more to get a good yield moving.
Well, I was going to say always need more. Sometimes I forget. I'm in southern Alberta. It's dry. We're always happy with rain, but you do bring up a good point. Like John Gilly does not want more rain. He wants to get the seed in the ground first. So
Don't you have those wonderful sprinklers down there though, Kara?
Yeah. Okay. Let's there we go on the irrigation conversation. On a different note, Jeff Nielsen says, "Hey, the video is skipping like the old 45 record." Well, Jeff, we fix our rural internet issues and then maybe the video won't be skipping. If you could lobby for that or something, that would be probably.
He's going the wrong way across the field. He's probably bouncing a little too hard on the going the wrong way.
Jeff, if you're watching, or you let us know if you're watching from the cab. And while anyone else is here and watching, let us know where you're watching from, how you're doing, how seeding conditions are going. We are always happy to hear from you guys. So yes, very much welcomed rain. We're gonna hope that the sun shines in northern. Well, we're gonna hope the sun shines everywhere, but that some conditions start drying out up there for them for sure. So moving into kind of some other conversations, it's still quite early. I mean, it's not overly early, but you're getting wheat in the ground. Things are starting to come up. If we're getting any frost and it's cool, what sorts of things are we going to be looking out for?
Yeah, sure. I mean, early is always relative in Alberta. Yeah, we like what is early. Sometimes May feels early and sometimes April feels early, but I think a lot of producers are pleased with the progress and how well they've been able to move, and maybe that's a factor of the lack of rain we've been seeing up until now. But I know I've received a few calls and text messages about what looks like issues in the field and maybe germination issues, or is there something going on with fertility, and typically what I'm seeing is kind of a yellow banding that's across the cereals that have emerged, and usually this is an indication of frost, and sometimes it can be hard to identify at first, but after a few days after frost you can see a yellow band where that frost line kind of sat on those wheat or barley plants. So the top part of the leaf will be green, but there will be a band, maybe like an inch or inch and a half band on those leaves that, and even on the coleoptile, so that first leaf that pops up where it's yellow and it's looking like, uh-oh, am I seeing an issue here? But usually if you're not seeing what we call a water-soaked looking leaf after a few days, and you're just seeing that yellow, it's going to grow out of it, no problem. And that's what we typically see. I don't, very often see spring cereals getting hit that hard where they need to be reseeded. I know there's a couple each year that maybe happen, but the majority of the time they're going to push through. And the one producer I was talking to, I said, I will almost welcome these little nips of frost that come and hit our cereal crops, because we're all familiar with the statement of seed in the dust and your bins will bust. And I think getting a little nip of frost can provide that same benefit. Plants, they kind of have a genetic memory, if you want to think about it that way. When they encounter a stress, whether it be drought or whether it be frost, it regulates a lot of their stress hormones and stress genes, and then they kind of sit primed and ready to deal with more stresses as they come in. So then your plant is I don't want to use the word more hardy, but more able to deal with stresses when they come in later in the season. So we kind of welcome these, and it's a sign that we're getting these crops in early. We're taking better advantage of our season. We're getting more of that moisture as we're getting those crops in early. So a little bit of a frost nip isn't the worst thing in the world. But when you do see that, make sure you poke out 3 to 5 days after. Take a look. If you're seeing water-soaked leaves, pull those plants up and take a look at the actual crown of that plant, and see whether that crown is still white and still looking healthy. If it's getting kind of mushy and you can kind of squeeze it and push it around and it's, again, water-soaked looking, then you might want to be a little bit concerned. And you'll typically see these areas where you're more likely to see heavy frost, or you have less moisture in the ground. Some of those hilltops, those drier, sandier hilltops, are where you're going to see more of that stress. But there's a lot of factors that play a role in how much frost affects plants. So, topography is going to play a role. Wind's going to play a role. How much moisture is going to play a role. Soil temperature is going to play a role. How much trash is on that soil surface is going to either add protection or not. So there's a lot of factors there. So kind of poking around and seeing what you're seeing across the whole field is going to help you get a better idea.
And what about the difference between tolerance when it comes to wheat and barley? I mean, and obviously barley, we're talking malt, we're talking feed, so there's a difference there too. But when it comes to tolerance of frost, is there any differences between them?
So there hasn't been there really hasn't been any research in Western Canada done on barley. Luckily, we've had quite a bit of research done by Brian Barris and Graham Collier on ultra early seeding of spring wheat. And through that process, we've seen some of these crops get hit with, on the wheat side, -8, -10. You see some frosting of the tips of the leaves, and you might lose some of the tip of the leaf. But likely you're not going to have any damage to that growing crown. It's still under the ground. You're still getting that protection from the warm soil, and it's just going to push through. And again, it's really just going to strengthen that plant as it moves through. When we talk about barley, again, there isn't really any solid research that's been done at this point. So a lot of this is anecdotal, what we've seen in other research trials, when we're having two trials side by side, that may be part of different trials, but we get the same amount of frost on both. Typically, we see a little bit more of an impact on the barley side, more in that -4 to -6 range, where we start seeing those leaf tip burning and leaf loss. But again, it has to be that underground part of the plant that gets impacted, which will really take a lot of cold days repeatedly in a row to cause excessive damage and really kill that plant off.
Now, we got a couple comments coming in here. Well, Jeff replied to us. He said, no, he's finished seeding. So congrats, Jeff. That is always awesome to hear. Kevin Bishop says, I am out of corn seed. Can I get some more deliveries today? He's watching from the Chilliwack Fraser Valley. So that's always good too. Carl's got a great comment here for you. He says, excellent comment on early frost. And I believe also a light frost is actually a good thing. So once again, that's obviously their comments are being echoed by the farmers too. So always great, and thanks for the comments, guys. Keep them coming. We love to hear where you're at. And so sticking on the frost conversation, Jeremy, we're at the time of the year we're starting to really evaluate our winter wheat as well. Any winter cereals that might have gone in back in the fall and are now really coming up and really starting to show. What sorts of valuation are we looking at there?
I like this. We did the wheat school video. What was it, last month, where we talked about getting that assessment. What are we looking at? And now we're actually getting into the timing where we're starting to see that winter wheat green up. We probably already seen that a lot in the southern part of the province, but the central and northern part of the province, we're probably really starting to see that green up happening now. So we really want to get an idea of what's left of our plant stand. Is it surviving? Am I going to expect a crop out of this? So really, we typically the recommendation is somewhere between May 15th and May 25th, but I feel like this year we're a little bit more accelerated in terms of timeline of getting out there and getting an assessment. And the first thing I want to say is, leaf color is not an indication of whether winter wheat is going to survive. I think there's this kind of feeling when you drive by a field and you're seeing all of these brown and maybe even purple and yellow looking leaves, and you're going, oh my goodness, what is going on with this winter wheat? I better load up the sprayer and clear this thing out so I can get a different crop in before I have to make a tough decision on timing. And I would say, take a step back and walk that field. Dig up a few plants in varying parts of the field and bring them inside. Put them in a wet paper towel. And what you're looking for is, you're not actually looking for leaf growth right away. What you're looking for is root growth. What that plant is going to do is it's going to build new roots before it starts putting out new shoots or new leaves. So you want to get an indication of whether you're seeing fresh, new, white, clean looking roots growing when you bring that inside. And that's going to give you an indication of whether those plants are going to survive or not. Pick from where you think might be tough areas of the field, pick from where you might think are good areas of the field, and that'll give you an idea of whether you're going to see survival. Winter kill is one of the biggest concerns when it comes to growing winter wheat. There's a huge amount of benefits to growing winter wheat. We're able to capture more of that spring moisture. Less often we have to hit it with a herbicide, which means it's great when it comes to managing resistance. Typically, we're seeing better yields out of winter wheat than something like spring wheat. So there's a lot of benefits to it, but there's some challenges in Western Canada with getting survival. One of them is we want to put winter wheat in a field that has a good stubble, so that way we're able to capture snowfall, and then it's able to protect that wheat as it moves through the winter. But one of the bigger things that actually impacts winter wheat is that melt that we get in the spring, and then the refreezes that happen, and it can actually suffocate those plants as they're growing. So we want to go out and we want to check what that survival looks like. In general, we're aiming for a 20 plants per square foot or more. That's going to get us that strong yield. We can get good economic yields when we're talking about 15 to 20 plants per square foot as well. Some of the past research has shown, in the range of 19 plants per square foot, we're getting 58 bushels. When we drop down to 13 or 15 area, we're getting 55. So it's not a huge jump, but once we start getting below that 15, then we start getting into higher risk, and it might be good to bring in an agronomist and kind of assess that stand. Making the decision on reseeding winter wheat is not a simple decision. We're talking about timelines here, how far we're pushing into the spring season, what crop options we have left to put in there. What have we put down for fertilizer? What have we put down for herbicides? Are those herbicides that we've put down already are going to impact a crop decision change. So it's important, if you feel like you're at risk, bring in someone who's experienced with getting an idea of whether that crop is going to survive, and then manage that field. If you do feel like you need to seed and that decision has been made, think about all those options or all those considerations of what have I done to this field already? What does my timeline look like? And then how does that timeline relate to what crop I'm deciding to put in there? So again, highly recommend to have that discussion with an experienced agronomist and bring them on to take a look at that field. There's a huge value in scouting and looking for disease too when you're checking this out. I mean, stripe rust is one of those diseases that can potentially overwinter. So getting out there and taking a look at that and seeing whether you're seeing any issues with rust. We're seeing an increased amount of fields where we're seeing bacterial leaf streak, which is probably getting more conversation on the spring wheat side, but it can certainly move into winter wheat as well. So we can take, if you're going out there and taking a look at what's going on in the disease and you're seeing issues, take pictures, share that with your agronomist and get an idea of what it might be. Because then when we're talking about seeding the next crop, are we at risk of that green bridge? Or do we want to make sure we're taking better precautions to eliminate that green bridge and mitigate issues for following crops? So, yeah, those are kind of the big things we want to think about when we think about spring assessment. And yeah, I mean, boots in the ground is going to be a huge thing, and getting someone who's experienced taking a look at that crop and making that assessment.
And now I realize this is kind of agronomy related, obviously, but you're out in the field and you can't always have an agronomist with you, whether it be distance or right now, COVID, who knows what's going on, right? There's lots of factors, but we're often all over Twitter posting all sorts of photos. From an agronomist point of view, what makes a good photo? What are you really looking for if you want to start evaluating things through photos?
That's a very interesting question, Kara, and I think I would want to rephrase that question as what makes a good photo set? Because when you're assessing impact of whether it be disease or insect or environmental issues, you really want to be thinking about, okay, how do I paint a picture that not only shows me from 10,000 feet up, but from an inch away? So you want to take pictures of, where in the field am I seeing these issues? Am I seeing them in certain areas, maybe in low areas, maybe in high areas of the field? Am I seeing them close to borders? Am I seeing them more in the center, more at entrances? So you want to get an idea first off of, okay, where in this field am I seeing these issues? Am I seeing it in an irregular pattern? So is it kind of move with the landscape, or is it potentially a more I'm going to say man-made pattern where you see a straight line up the field? And asking those questions to yourself first can then help later down the road when you're trying to make a decision of what is actually impacting my crop right now. And then from there, that's when you want to start kind of getting into the closer images of digging up the plant, getting multiple examples of similar but different symptoms of what you're seeing, because not every disease or issue that comes up looks the same on every plant through that issue's timeline on that plant. When we think about frost, that yellow band is the first thing that pops up. But if it's really strong, then we start seeing that water soaked issue later on. And we might see more or less of those issues in different parts of the field. So you really want to paint a wide picture of what's going on. Nothing is more challenging when you get a single picture of a single plant and someone says, what is this? And no agronomist is going to try and answer that. And if they do, they're taking a bold step, because there's, how many times have you asked an agronomist a question and their answer is, it depends? And those it depends are the pieces of information you're looking to gather by capturing all those images whether it be again at the 10,000 foot scale or right in close to that plant. So what makes a good picture set is one that paints a picture of what's going on across the field as well as at the micro level of individual plants.
And also probably making sure it's in focus too, hey?
I guess I would hope that that would be assumed. But when I say that, I can immediately think of multiple images I've gotten where I have to squint and say, is that canola or is that wheat? So yes, absolutely. Make sure that you know how to use the tool that you're using, whether you're using a high quality camera, make sure that you know how to use it. Otherwise you're stuck with a bunch of images that no one can really get an idea of. Luckily, we typically all have cameras in our pockets at this point, and an iPhone does a pretty darn good job of taking quality images. So if you have one of those, that's probably your best bet. There's no need to get too fancy. Leave that up to the scientists when they're trying to get good ideas of images of certain issues. We just want to get an idea of what's going on. Again, paint a picture of that field and those plants.
Absolutely. And now another thing that people are when we're, down scouting, taking photos, you're also maybe noticing some insects. It's the time of the year we're going to start looking out for things like wireworms. Do you want to talk about what wireworm pressure can look like and why you actually need to be out looking for them?
Yeah, wireworm pressure is interesting, and it's something that I've kind of gathered over the past couple of years of poking through fields and producers not being sure what the issue is. There's a bald patch here, there's a bald patch there. It looks like this is a little scattered here in terms of emergence. Am I having trouble with emergence? Wireworms can be challenging to locate. So when you're starting to see, and these patches of wireworm issues can be as small as 1 by 2 feet. Last year, I was down in the Claire's home area, and a producer said to me, like, I don't know what's going on with my wheat field. There's just some weird patches. Could it be a residue issue? And we went to one small spot. It was 3 by 4 feet, nothing huge, and dug there for 10 minutes and rolled the soil through our hands and started to realize that there was quite the population of tiny wireworms, and they're really small. And if you start to see, especially in the southern part of the province where we're seeing increased pressure, luckily we have more options for control at this point. But we're seeing it start to spread. So capturing or seeing this early is really going to help mitigate issues in the future. You don't want to ignore those small patches, and then in 2 years you realize that it's 4 acres that they've taken down, or even more. So if you're starting to see those patches, take the time to dig up a bunch of soil, move it through your hands, look for those small wireworms, but also take a look at the seeds. Those are going to be a good indicator of whether it is wireworm or not. If you're seeing tiny little shot holes in that seed, or you're seeing a seed that it started to emerge, or the seedling started to emerge, but it's kind of slowed down and died, and you see that kind of hole in the seed, that's a pretty good indication that wireworms have fed on that seed. Sometimes you'll still find the wireworm right in the seed. But I think taking those steps now, especially in the southern part of the province, when maybe people are already starting to ask the question, okay, do I need to start going and scouting for weeds? Also take a look at these small little patches. Don't ignore them, because they could be an indication of a much larger issue that's yet to come. And it's better to plan for those or consider those rather than having to deal with them at an ideal time when you're looking at a half emerged crop. So it's something that's become obviously more and more of a concern, and I think it's something that needs to be kind of on the forefront of that early scouting plan.
Absolutely. And wireworms, if I'm correct, they're nighttime feeders, right? Like you don't see them during the day, or am I incorrect on that one?
I've found them during the day, so if you've heard that, maybe I'm a better digger than others, but I that's not something I'm aware of. However, that doesn't mean it's not true.
I am not an entomologist, so we will leave that to some of our great entomology friends out there. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
and
we're
you don't.
looking. Sorry.
I was just going to say, you don't want to wait too late either, because once those plants have emerged and moved, and the soil warms up, those wireworms are going to actually move down in the soil. So you'll see the symptoms, but you won't be able to for sure identify that that's what it is. So that 2 to 3 leaf stage, go out there and dig and locate it. Some of these patches, as they grow, if you look at some of the research that's been done in the past, and luckily Dr. Haley Catton at AAFC Lethbridge has been doing a ton of research on this as of the past few years, and Dr. Wim van Herk in BC. Some of these wireworms can live in the soil for 6-8 years, and they'll feed on other things and kind of wait for more crops to come in later. So they can be a perpetual long-term pest. So having them on your radar and being able to locate them and knowing where they're an issue is going to be important to manage them later on. Unfortunately, we don't have a threshold number on them right now. We can't say, if you see this amount of pressure, then you should be using a seed treatment to control them. But if you're starting to see them, then you can better take advantage of those control methods before they greatly impact your yield.
Absolutely. So that's kind of the. Would you say that's the number one insect to watch right now?
I wouldn't say it's number one. I think there's a few that need to be on the radar this year, and I think wheat midge is certainly one that we're seeing a population increase. And this rain that we got this past weekend is going to help those populations of wheat midge. We want to see kind of that. We don't want to see, but when we see 20, 25 millimeters of rain in that May timeline, that's helping those populations increase. We've already seen the populations increase kind of in that Edmonton, Lloydminster corridor area and a little bit further south. We're seeing those populations increase, and because the populations haven't been around for a while, that means the beneficial population has been low. So as we see these wheat midge populations go up, there will not be the beneficials there to help control them. So if you aren't using a midge tolerant variety, scouting as we're getting close to that head emergence timing is going to be important. Wheat stem sawfly is also an issue that's been growing over the past couple of years. I know a few of the producers I've been working with have been getting frustrated. Last year, it was, the comment was, if it wasn't for the thickness of the stand, all of this would have lodged, and it was an atypical stand for those areas just because there was a decent amount of moisture. So those stems were able to hold each other up when they started falling. But in a typical year in most of these areas, that's not the typical stand that you would see. So you're more likely to deal with fully lodged crop, which means you're dealing with quality issues, which means you're dealing with harvest issues, which means you're dealing with yield issues. So it just kind of piles up on top of each other. There are solid stem varieties available. I know Lillian historically was one of the best, but once that moved into CNHR and now there's no real seed sources available for it, there are new varieties available. So talk to your seed growers in the area, see what they're recommending, and there are options to help mitigate it. If you're lucky enough to live south enough, you could potentially look at that Durham option as well. There's plenty of solid stem varieties in the Durham class that could help mitigate that.
And producers, if they're looking for more info, should check out the Prairie Pest Monitoring Network as well. I know they recently launched a new website. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so they moved from the Prairie Pest Monitoring Network, maybe to take a step back, is essentially a information blog or service to producers and agronomists and the industry that identifies pests as well as pest risk throughout the season. So they provide a lot of information on in-season updates of what pests are at what expected stage based on environmental conditions. So a lot of these pests, we can make a prediction on how far along they are in their growth or life stage based on environmental conditions. So heat units and rainfall, and and from there we can say, you know, we're getting close to the risk stage of these insects emerging and then being a risk in crop. You know, they provide information for a lot of the for all of the major crops and a lot of the major insects that align with those crops. So you'll go to that website, and they've moved to prairiepest.ca. So if you go on Google, search on prairiepest.ca, and you'll find that, and go subscribe, and you'll get in-season updates. I've already received one actually today talking about flea beetle, how the striped flea beetle is already out and causing issues. So you're going to receive timely information about when to be monitoring for pests, what pests to be monitoring for, what to keep an eye out for. And it's it's, for me, it's a very valuable resource. So I highly recommend, if you're monitoring, so if you're in Western Canada and insects are an issue, which is for all of us, it's an important subscription to be on. And then kind of aligning with that is the Prairie Crop Disease Monitoring Network. So this is run by Kelly Turkington out of AAFC Lacombe. And this is really focused on the disease side. So the Prairie Pest Monitoring Network is really focused on insects and insect pressure, where the Prairie Crop Disease Monitoring Network is really focused on disease monitoring. So we're talking about stripe rust, and a lot of the major issues that we deal with when it comes to the major crops in Western Canada. So again, if you go to Google and search Prairie Crop Disease Monitoring Network, you're looking for the Prairie Crop Disease blog spot. And you're going to get scouting tips, a scouting calendar. Again, subscribe to that. I know that Kelly has worked hard with Jennifer Otani, who works out of AAFC Beaver Lodge. So it's if you were part of or were subscribed to the Prairie Pest Monitoring Network prior to their moving to the new website, the Prairie Crop Disease Monitoring Network website is going to look very familiar. It's in its growing stages. It's relatively new, so they're looking at including more information. But again, that's going to be timely information throughout the season to give you an idea of what you should be monitoring for, when you should be monitoring for it, and how you should be monitoring for it. So again, these two pieces of very valuable information when it comes to being on top of what biotic or abiotic stresses are potential risks to our cereal crops. These are two very valuable tools to have in your back pocket.
And Brian Kennedy, our backseat producer, is providing these links here. So if you're watching on Twitter, thank you very much, Brian. The links are there. And if you're watching this later, of course, you can see the links above us. So be sure to check those out as well. Check out our Pest and Predators podcast if you're looking for something to listen to. It is also sponsored by Field Heroes. So we go through all those things as well as our wheat schooler, canola school, pulse school. We got it all. So and if you like listening to Jeremy, he tends to appear on a few of those as well. So that's always great. Now, I know we always have a huge list of things we want to talk about because there's just always so much to talk about at this time of the year. We're very quickly running out of time. Any last minute remarks you want to make that you really want to make sure we drive home with producers today?
Yeah, one thing that's come up recently is rolling, and this comes up every year. You know, when should I be rolling my cereals? The one caution I want to make to producers is you don't want to roll too early, and you don't want to roll too late. There's a few ideal times that I would recommend, and again, we don't have a ton of research on this in Western Canada, so this is based on understanding the physiology of cereal plants and when we want to mitigate stress that can be caused by rolling. When you're rolling, you really want to aim for right after seeding. You're going to cause the least amount of potential impact for that potential seedling. You're just kind of moving the soil around, and that seed is going to settle in that soil. You're not going to cause too many issues. But if you wait a couple days after that, that seedling is going to start to germinate. And when a cereal seedling germinates, the first thing that comes out of that seed is what we call a special leaf, the coleoptile. The coleoptile is designed to push through soil. So it is tough, it is hard, and it's designed to push through. And what it does is allows for a pathway for the true leaves to eventually come up. But if you end up rolling that field while that coleoptile is starting to push through, there's a risk that you could bend or break that coleoptile. And if you do that, then it has less ability or potential less ability to push through that tough soil, making it more difficult for those true leaves to push through. So you really want to, if you're not able to do it right after seeding, wait till that 2 to 3 leaf stage, and you want to be doing it in dry conditions. If it's wet, you're going to end up picking up some of those leaves and ripping them out of the ground. One of the recommendations you see with pulse crops is that in the early morning, those crops have a lot of moisture in them, so the stems are stiff and hard. So if you roll, there's a higher risk that you're going to bend and break them. So they recommend to do it in the heat of the afternoon, where they're a little bit wilted, so they'll bend over and come back up. You could aim for that with cereals as well, although we don't know exactly whether that's going to cause a benefit, but I don't think it can hurt. A wheat leaf or a barley leaf is a little bit different than a stem of a pulse, but it's probably not a bad tactic to take if you want to cause less damage. So in that 2 to 3 leaf stage, if you start getting into that 4 to 5 or later, then you're at risk of potentially damaging those extra tillers that are coming, or that growing point, and cause extra tillers to emerge from that plant. And we know in Western Canada and a lot of in Alberta, we don't want excess tillers. Excess tillers means a longer flowering period, means longer maturity, means less quality. So targeting that just after seeding in that 2 to 3 leaf stage is going to be your ideal timing.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much, I'm sure. And if producers want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
They can find me on Twitter at Boychyn Jeremy. They can find me on, they can email me at the growing point at albertawheatbarley.ca. Or if you go to either the Alberta Wheat or Alberta Barley website and look at the About Us, you'll find me on there. All my contact information is on there, and you can reach out to me there for more information.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Thanks, Kara. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're watching this later, send me an email, and if you're still wanting to let us know where you're at in seeding. We always love hearing your seeding stories and hearing what's going on out in the field. So feel free to send us an email. We love hearing from you. And thanks for all your comments. And of course, thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow, I believe we'll have Shane Thomas of Upstream Ag Insights tomorrow, RealAg Live. But if you want to tune in, one more live show that you can tune in tonight is the Agronomists at 6 p.m. Mountain or 8 p.m. Eastern. That's always a good show. That lasts about an hour. It'll be host Lindsay Smith. And tonight on the show, we'll have the spray guys. So we'll have Jason DeVoe and Tom Wolf on. So bring all your sprayer questions. They will be sure to get to them, I'm sure. And they'll do it with a smile on their faces. So looking very much forward to that one. But in the meantime, thanks everyone for getting real and getting connected. And we'll talk to you guys soon.